Satanism. Satanism is one of the most demonized religions in the world because many assume it is built on worshipping evil. In reality, modern Satanism has two main forms. The first is LaVeyan Satanism, which does not believe in a literal devil. Instead, Satan is treated as a symbol of human freedom, personal power, and resistance to oppressive authority. Its teachings focus on self-discipline, logic, and individual responsibility. The second form is theistic Satanism, where followers see Satan as an actual spiritual being. Even here, the figure is not always seen as evil, but rather as a liberator from cosmic tyranny. Satanism was demonized heavily in the 1980s during the Satanic Panic, when false accusations of ritual abuse spread across the United States. Despite thousands of claims, not one was proven. The panic created a public narrative that attached accusations of violence, cult activity, and criminal behavior to anyone associated with Satanism. In everyday practice, most Satanists do not harm animals or engage in violence. Their rituals focus on symbolism, self-expression, and psychological empowerment, rather than dark supernatural worship. Voodoo. Voodoo is often portrayed as a system of curses, dolls, and dark magic, but its actual form is a blend of West African spirituality and Catholic symbolism shaped during the era of slavery. Voodoo teaches belief in Bondi, the high god who is distant but good, and the Elwa, spiritual intermediaries who guide, protect, and interact with the living. Voodoo ceremonies use drums, dance, and chanting to open communication with these spirits, often for healing, community support, or practical guidance. It became demonized through colonial propaganda, where slave owners feared the unity and resistance that Voodoo created among enslaved Africans. During and after the Haitian Revolution, Western nations painted Voodoo as barbaric and dangerous to justify political and economic isolation of Haiti. Hollywood later amplified this image using zombie stereotypes, curses, and occult rituals that barely resemble real Voodoo practice. In reality, Voodoo centers on honoring ancestors, caring for community members, and keeping harmony between the living and the spiritual world. Its priests and priestesses are often community helpers, not sorcerers. Witchcraft. Witchcraft is one of the oldest human spiritual practices, but it became demonized in Europe during the Middle Ages when the Church associated any non-Christian ritual with devil worship. Fear intensified between the 15th and 18th centuries when legal systems permitted executions of people accused of magic. The vast majority of these accused were women who lived outside social norms: midwives, healers, widows, or simply people who drew suspicion from their neighbors. Modern Wicca, founded in the 20th century, has no connection to the devil. Instead, it is a nature-based religion built around seasonal cycles, lunar phases, and the balance of masculine and feminine spiritual forces. Wiccans practice rituals that focus on meditation, honoring the earth, and setting intentions. Their core rule, known as the Wiccan Rede, states, "And it harm none, do what ye will," placing non-harm at the center of belief. Witchcraft remains demonized because society continues to mix it with dark magic or harmful spellwork, but practitioners emphasize healing, personal growth, and natural spirituality. Scientology. Scientology became demonized partly because of its unusual beliefs and partly because of controversies involving its leadership, finances, and aggressive legal tactics. At its core, Scientology teaches that humans are thetans, immortal spiritual beings who have forgotten their true nature. Through a practice called auditing, followers attempt to overcome past trauma and regain spiritual freedom. Scientology claims it can help individuals achieve a state called clear, where mental and emotional burdens are released. The religion was founded by L. Ron Hubbard in the mid-20th century and grew rapidly, but reports from former members and journalists created an atmosphere of suspicion. Governments in some countries added pressure by investigating the organization for tax issues, coercive behavior, or secrecy. These factors built a reputation of danger and manipulation, even though many members speak of personal growth. Scientology remains controversial because its structure is rigid, its teachings are expensive to access, and it maintains tight control over information. While much of the criticism is rooted in real events, media portrayals have amplified fear beyond the daily reality of many ordinary followers. Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses are often demonized not because of violence or occult beliefs, but because their practices set them apart from mainstream society. They do not celebrate birthdays or traditional holidays, do not engage in political elections, and refuse blood transfusions based on their interpretation of some Bible text. Their commitment to door-to-door evangelism has made them highly visible and sometimes unwelcome. They also have a strict community structure that can result in disfellowshipping, a form of excommunication that separates members from social interaction with the congregation. Critics view this as harsh or isolating, which feeds public distrust. Historically, witnesses were persecuted in multiple countries because of their refusal to support war efforts or pledge allegiance to national symbols. In Nazi Germany, thousands were imprisoned or executed because they would not renounce their faith. Today, their demonization stems from both misunderstandings and genuine disagreements with their strict lifestyle rules. Despite the controversies, most witnesses lead peaceful, disciplined lives centered on Bible study and community service. Wahhabism and Salafi Islam. Wahhabism and Salafi Islam are often grouped together in public imagination and labeled as extremist or violent. Wahhabism originated in 18th century Arabia through the teachings of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who called for purification of Islamic practice and elimination of innovations he believed strayed from the Quran and Hadith. Salafism, more broadly, encourages Muslims to follow the example of the earliest generations known as the Salaf. While some Salafi groups have been linked to extremist movements, the majority are peaceful and focused on conservative religious living. Demonization occurs because extremist organizations sometimes use Salafi language to justify political goals, causing global audiences to view the entire tradition as threatening. Geopolitical conflicts, terrorism, and media coverage have deeply shaped the reputation of these movements, even though mainstream adherents reject violence and emphasize strict personal morality. The label has become loaded, meaning many people within the tradition avoid using it because it carries assumptions of radicalism that do not reflect their actual beliefs. Druze. The Druze faith is a small ethno-religious community in the Middle East with beliefs that are not fully open to outsiders. This secrecy has fueled centuries of myths, accusations, and demonization. The Druze religion began in the 11th century as a branch of Ismaili Islam, but quickly developed into its own system with unique doctrines, including reincarnation and a spiritual hierarchy. Their holy texts are restricted to initiates known as uqal, while ordinary members focus on ethical living and loyalty to the community. Historically, foreign empires and local rivals labeled the Druze as heretical or disloyal, leading to massacres and forced conversions. Because outsiders could not understand their beliefs, the Druze were often accused of sorcery, deception, or political conspiracies. In reality, the community emphasizes honor, hospitality, and protection of their land. Their secrecy is a survival strategy developed during centuries of persecution, not an indication of sinister practices. Today, Druze communities live mostly in Lebanon, Syria, and Israel, maintaining a strong cultural identity. Yazidism. Yazidism is often demonized because of the misunderstood figure known as Melek, the peacock angel. Outsiders wrongly equated Melek with the devil, leading to accusations of devil worship throughout history. Yazidis reject this label entirely. Their faith teaches that God created 7 holy beings who govern the world, and Melek is the highest among them, an angel who demonstrated loyalty and was honored, not condemned. The demonization of Yazidis intensified during the Ottoman era and reached a tragic peak in the 21st century when ISIS targeted them for genocide. Many of the myths about Yazidis were created by medieval travelers and repeated by missionaries who misunderstood their prayers and symbols. Yazidism itself is monotheistic, deeply tied to tradition, and focused on purity, community ethics, and reverence for sacred natural sites. Marriages, festivals, and pilgrimages form the core of Yazidi spiritual life. Their suffering in recent history highlights how misunderstanding and fear can lead to extreme violence. Falun Gong. Falun Gong is a spiritual movement based on slow exercises, meditation, and teachings about truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. It became demonized primarily by the Chinese government after it grew to millions of followers in the 1990s. The movement was seen as independent, organized, and not under state control, which triggered a severe crackdown in 1999. State media began portraying Falun Gong as dangerous, irrational, or cult-like, creating a strong global narrative of fear. Outside China, however, practitioners lead peaceful lives centered on meditation and moral improvement. Falun Gong does not require temples, fees, or formal membership. Its founder, Li Hongzhi, emphasizes spiritual discipline and purity, though some teachings about cosmic levels or supernatural forces have contributed to public skepticism. The demonization of Falun Gong is largely political rather than theological, making it a modern example of how governments shape public perception of spiritual movements. Shinto of World War II. Shinto as a traditional Japanese religion is peaceful and rooted in honoring kami, ancestors, and natural forces. However, state Shinto, a political version created before World War II, became demonized because it was closely tied to nationalism, emperor worship, and military expansion. The government used Shinto rituals and symbols to promote loyalty and obedience, linking spiritual identity with political power. After Japan's defeat, Allied forces dismantled state Shinto and framed it as a dangerous ideology comparable to fascism. Because of this legacy, many people outside Japan mistakenly associate Shinto with militarism, even though post-war Shinto is entirely different. Modern Shinto is decentralized, gentle, and focused on purity, gratitude, and seasonal festivals. Its demonized reputation comes from a specific political era rather than the religion itself. Mormonism, Latter-day Saints. Mormonism became demonized shortly after its founding in the 19th century. Early American society reacted strongly to the introduction of new scripture, claims of restored prophecy, and the practice of polygamy. The movement faced mob violence, forced expulsions, and even government intervention. Critics often accused Mormons of secret rituals, political manipulation, and un-American beliefs. Although the church formally ended polygamy in 1890, the stigma persisted. Today, Latter-day Saints are still sometimes portrayed as strange or cult-like because of their unique theology, including belief in pre-mortal existence, modern prophets, and eternal family bonds. However, members emphasize family life, charity, missionary work, and personal spiritual growth. Much of the demonization comes from misunderstanding new religious ideas that developed in a nation accustomed to older traditions.